Diddy's ex wrapped up her testimony today after 4 grueling days on the stand.
She might have a lawsuit too.
Singer Dawn Richard testifies that Sean Diddy Combs hit Cassie Ventura with a skillet full of eggs.
You got to go back to the drugs and the alcohol, man. The drugs and the alcohol, man. And those things will make you do strange things.
What does it take to silence a courtroom? Dawn Richard's testimony about Cassie's alleged abuse by Diddy left everyone speechless. Get ready for the bombshell revelations that pulled the curtain back on an unimaginable reality.
Diddy's ex wrapped up her testimony today after 4 grueling days on the stand. The defense hit her hard during cross-examination, asking her about a stint in rehab for PTSD, a rape allegation, and asking her to read explicit text messages from over the past 15 years.
Richard accused Combs of sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and a hostile work environment by being exposed to sex trafficking and sex acts. She also alleged that she was a victim of false imprisonment. In her suit, Richard stated she was seeking compensatory and punitive damages, as well as other costs for post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and emotional suffering, and financial losses she suffered as a result of Combs' alleged behavior. Combs has denied her allegations. His lawyer told E! News in September, Mr. Combs is shocked and disappointed by this lawsuit. Richard's testimony in Combs' ongoing trial comes 8 months after she accused the rapper in a lawsuit of subjecting her to years of inhumane working conditions, which included groping, assault, and false imprisonment. The lawsuit, filed in September, obtained by E! News, stated, Mr. Combs frequently held meetings with Ms. Richard wearing only his underwear, despite Ms. Richard's protests and repeated requests for him to put on clothing. In her filing, the 41-year-old also alleged that Combs ordered her to strip down to her underwear, made demeaning remarks about her body, and entered her dressing room unannounced while she was unclothed, and touched her without her permission under the guise of showing the stylist what to do.
Dawn Richard's
testimony hit the courtroom like a lightning bolt. A former member of Danity Kane, the girl group created under Diddy's management. Dawn was more than just a former collaborator. She was a close observer of the inner workings of Diddy's world. This made her testimony one of the most critical pieces in the trial's first week. People expected that she might have a few insights to share, but the details she revealed left the room frozen in shock. What exactly did she say about Cassie's alleged abuse that silenced an entire courtroom? Dawn's connection to both Diddy and Cassie wasn't just professional. It was deeply personal. As part of Danity Kane, she worked closely with Diddy, meaning she interacted with him and the people in his orbit on a daily basis. Cassie, of course, was his longtime girlfriend, a relationship that many thought looked glamorous from the outside. But Dawn's testimony painted a much darker picture of what really went on behind closed doors. Her words added context to the years of whispers about abuse that had hovered around Diddy and Cassie's relationship. When it was Dawn's turn to take the stand, the courtroom's energy shifted immediately. She described moments where she allegedly witnessed Diddy's angry outbursts, leaving those around him walking on eggshells. According to her, these outbursts didn't spare Cassie, who often bore the brunt of his fury. Dawn was clear that her description wasn't based on rumors, but on things she personally experienced. She was there watching it all unfold. Dawn spoke in detail about one specific incident that left the room in stunned silence. Without revealing any quotes, she described an argument where Diddy reportedly screamed at Cassie to the point where her physical reaction betrayed the emotional toll his words had taken. It wasn't just the yelling, though. It was the menacing tone and the way Diddy allegedly manipulated every situation so that Cassie would feel powerless to defend herself. For Dawn, this moment became etched in her memory, and she described it as one of several instances where Cassie seemed trapped under Diddy's control. The weight of Dawn's testimony didn't just come from the events she described, but from the way it was delivered. Her voice reportedly carried traces of anger and sadness, as though she had been waiting for years to finally speak out. Legal analysts in the room reportedly say that first-hand accounts like hers can be a powerful tool in a trial. It's one thing to hear allegations in a general sense, but it's another thing entirely to have a witness recount specific events they observed. For the jury, this sort of testimony brings the allegations to life. in a way that's hard to ignore. And Diddy's reaction, that was another story entirely. As Don spoke, reporters in the courtroom described his body language as defensive, almost as though he wasn't prepared for her to be so direct. He shifted in his seat, his expression darkened, and he reportedly leaned over to his legal team during her testimony. While he didn't interrupt, it was clear he wasn't happy with the picture Dawn was painting, and for good reason. Her words weren't just undermining his carefully curated public image, they were adding weight to Cassie's claims in a way that couldn't be ignored. But the moment that really landed with the jury and the public watching from the outside was when Dawn reportedly said she believed. Cassie spent most of her time just trying to survive. Those 5 words hit like a hammer, summing up years of alleged emotional and physical abuse in a way that left many in the courtroom visibly shaken. It wasn't just about the judgments or the alleged control Diddy exercised. It was about how Cassie had apparently lived in a constant state of fear and isolation with no clear way out. Dawn's testimony wasn't just another piece of evidence. It became a turning point in the trial, creating a ripple effect that would inevitably influence how the jury viewed Diddy moving forward. Her account tied into the larger narrative being built around the alleged abuse, adding another layer to the case that the defense will undoubtedly struggle to counter. As the first week of the trial came to a close, Dawn's words hung in the air. They weren't just about their memories. They were about shining a light on a situation that had been hidden for far too long, and with more witnesses expected to testify in the coming days, including others close to Cassie and Diddy. The courtroom is bracing for more revelations. What's next for this trial? Only time will tell, but for now, Dawn's bombshell testimony has set the stage for what could be a defining case in the world of celebrity justice.
If she witnessed, and she's saying that she witnessed a gangbang, which actually we know it as called a train. And she worked on the album, The Train to Paris. And like I heard one of the YouTube, it could be Tistel, say that we didn't know what the train to Paris meant. But now we know that the train to Paris was a train in Scotland. It wasn't a train in Paris, it was a train in Scotland. Every time I have a witness doing something is when 2 guys and 2 girls will go in the room. And that was just regular. And however they did it, whatever they did, that was their business. But he gotten bold enough, whereas that he would do that in front of Dawn and other people at a poolside in Scotland. You sure it was Scotland, man?
Kennedy Kane alum Don Richard, who began working with Sean Diddy Combs while competing on his show Making the Band in 2004, took the stand after Cassie wrapped her testimony May 16th. Richard joined Combs' group Diddy Dirty Money after Danity Kane disbanded. While on the stand, she told jurors that she saw Combs hit Ventura with a skillet full of eggs at his Los Angeles home in 2009. Richard testified per NBC News. He came downstairs asking where his phone was, and he threw her to the ground. He attempted to kick her. She fell to the ground and went into the fetal position, literally trying to hide her head. In addition to striking Ventura with the skillet, Richard said Combs put his arm around the singer's neck and took her upstairs before she heard glass breaking. Richard added, "I was scared for her. I was scared to do anything."
Drama hit another level when a shocking piece of evidence was introduced, an audio recording featuring Cassie on the tape she's reportedly heard threatening a Diddy associate who allegedly had video footage of a heated confrontation. The courtroom atmosphere shifted immediately. What could be so explosive that even the jurors were left visibly stunned at that recording? Marked a turning point in the trial. It didn't just offer a new glimpse into the toxic web of Diddy and Cassie's relationship, it exposed the emotional chaos both seemed to be caught in. The recording played out for the courtroom, and the words carried raw emotion that no one could ignore in it. Cassie's tone was desperate, furious, and unrelenting. Legal insiders described her words as a reflection of someone worn down by years of conflict and pain. Her threats seemed more like the breaking point of someone who felt trapped, rather than premeditation. It was that emotional rawness that gripped the room. Here's what we know about the tape. Cassie's voice is heard, addressing a man believed to be a close Diddy associate. This man allegedly had recorded proof of a violent altercation between Cassie and Diddy. Cassie's voice quivers between rage and determination as she demands answers and makes threats to protect herself, the recording shows just how far their issues extended, not only affecting their personal dynamic, but pulling in others who worked for Diddy. And that level of emotional instability, especially the fear of being exposed, was hard for jurors and onlookers alike to ignore. But why would Cassie be on such a precarious edge, threatening someone connected to Diddy experts? Following the trial suggested that moments like these aren't uncommon in abusive relationships. Years of manipulation, isolation, and emotional instability take a toll. Pipeline. These situations often reach their limit, manifesting behavior that might seem irrational to outsiders, but in reality is born out of relentless mental and emotional strain. One legal analyst even weighed in, saying the tape added layers of complexity to the ongoing narrative. It didn't just back up claims of an unhealthy, abusive relationship, it also suggested that Cassie was living in constant fight or flight mode, where her emotional responses became more extreme over time. The tape wasn't a simple moment of Cassie standing up for herself. It also showed the toll of reportedly being controlled, hurt, and boxed into a volatile relationship for years. You could almost hear that desperation in her voice. This wasn't about revenge, it seemed like survival for the jury. The audio presented a complicated picture. It amplified the severity of the allegations against Diddy while also forcing them to unpack Cassie's emotional state. Was the recording definitive proof of her struggles? Maybe not on its own, but when paired with Dawn Richards' testimony and other mounting accounts, it painted an even clearer portrait of a toxic cycle few could fathom. As impactful as the tape was, it left other questions for the courtroom to consider. Diddy's legal team is expected to argue that Cassie's emotional outburst discredits her claims, painting a picture of instability to sow doubt around her testimony. This strategy isn't surprising. Defense teams often resort to tactics like this when representing high-profile clients, and let's be clear, this won't just stretch into Cassie's words or actions. From the recording, rumors say more of her past, from her mental health to prior personal interactions, will soon be scrutinized by the defense. But here's the thing, the tape isn't just about one moment of anger. It's about the dynamics behind it. For years, Diddy has been portrayed as an untouchable figure in the music industry, while Cassie has been cast as the girlfriend. Her role often reduced to silence or submission in the public eye. That tape cracks that facade wide open. The courtroom wasn't just hearing Cassie's anger. They were hearing her struggle to reclaim power in a relationship where it seemed like she often had none. What comes next could upend everything. Will the defense lean harder into discrediting Cassie, or will more testimony, tapes, or evidence further dig into the realities of their relationship? One thing's certain. The jury is now dealing with not just a trial, but a deeply tangled story of power, control, and emotional fallout, and the next move could change everything.
She's gonna have to bring up into the lawsuit that Diddy stopped the way that she was working and how she could work by the fact that he would change, like you just said. What she would do, bro, he would turn off her mic and don't let her sing songs or don't let her do certain things, a part of the band. When he do her sexual advancements, I don't know what to say about that, brother. All I can say is that, all of it sounds like using his power. He's using his power to get at people that works for him. And when you do that, when they bring you to court, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna lose if they can prove it.
One text message, Cassie writes, "I'm lost without you."
We know now that she called herself Cece for Cassie Combs. We know now that she wanted to have a child with him.
Jurors also heard an audio recording where Cassie could be heard threatening to kill a Diddy associate who had video of one of her freak-offs with Diddy.
The jurors were shocked. I saw the eyebrows raised.
Cassie was asked about receiving a FaceTime from her now husband
Right.
while she was having sex with Diddy.
I think they're trying to use what they can again to discredit her.
Say team's strategy to shift the focus on two. Cassie's past may have seemed calculated at first, but it ultimately brought new dimensions to the case, ones they likely didn't anticipate. By highlighting Cassie's time in rehab, her struggle with PTSD, and a rape allegation from earlier in her life, they intended to dismantle her credibility. They wanted to frame her as emotionally unstable and unreliable, hoping that these personal battles would weaken her testimony. And Cassie, it painted a picture of a woman dealing with deep trauma and systemic manipulation. Legal analysts following the trial pointed out that this tactic inadvertently amplified the idea of vulnerability by bringing up her struggles. The defense might have actually strengthened claims about the emotional control Diddy allegedly exerted over her. Cassie's past experiences, rather than discrediting her, made it clearer how someone like Diddy could exploit those vulnerabilities to maintain control. In their relationship, one of the biggest talking points was the introduction of intimate text messages between Cassie and Diddy, including one where Cassie wrote, "I'm lost without you." The defense leaned heavily on these messages to paint her as emotionally dependent and to suggest that their relationship, while stormy, was consensual and mutual, but these texts only serve to highlight how complex and fragile their dynamic really was. Experts have pointed out that trauma survivors often express attachment to their abusers, not because their suffering didn't exist, but because they've been manipulated into believing they have no alternative. The courtroom heard these texts, alongside claims from the defense that Cassie's emotional status disqualified her ability to provide a clear, reliable account of what happened during her relationship with Diddy. Legal insiders said this approach often targets not only a person's testimony but their entire character. Survivors of abuse frequently face this kind of scrutiny, especially in trials involving high-profile defendants. It's a known legal strategy: highlight inconsistencies, bring up personal struggles, and attempt to create just enough doubt to sway public and jury opinion. But in Cassie's case, this tactic might have done more harm than good for the defense. Instead of poking holes in her story, it added depth to the narrative of someone who endured years of control and manipulation. By forcing Cassie to relive and defend these moments from her past, the defense may have unintentionally drawn more attention to Diddy's potential manipulation, especially considering their stark power imbalance during their years together. Many who followed the case noted how these revelations about Cassie's mental health and personal history only added layers of believability to her allegations. Her battle with PTSD and her rehab stint were reframed not as weaknesses but as potential consequences of living through an abusive, toxic relationship, instead of casting doubt on her words. This particular line of attack seemed to invite questions about how much of Cassie's emotional pain was a direct result of her dynamic with Diddy. In presenting these arguments, the defense may have hoped to distract from earlier testimony and evidence, but instead they created a more nuanced portrayal of Cassie as someone trying to navigate unimaginable circumstances. If anything, it emphasized how trapped she may have felt emotionally, mentally, and even physically in their relationship. This unexpected shift in courtroom dynamics is already influencing the way the jury perceives the case. These details push the story beyond just text messages or isolated incidents. It's becoming clearer that this is a story about patterns of behavior, power imbalances, and the toll it takes on those involved. And with more witnesses waiting to take the stand, including former Danny Kane members and people from inside Diddy's professional circle, the narrative is only becoming more complex. Whether intentional or not, defense's tactics to discredit Cassie might have only underscored the severity of her claims. As a trial progresses, the testimonies of others familiar with Diddy and Cassie's relationship will likely continue peeling back layers of this already explosive case.
Unfortunately, we're all going to take a disgusting trip to his seedy, awful world. You know, the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual.
The facts are the facts, the texts are the texts, and I think that the evidence will be clear.
That Ventura had a choice and that she chose to participate in those sexual encounters.
Where she is entertaining other people in the bedroom. He enjoyed having the freak offs.
She's being asked specifically about the drug use.
She is clearly excited about.
Aubrey Day is the next name making waves in this already explosive trial. As another former member of Danity Kane, she's stepping forward to give her own account of life under Diddy's management. What does she know? What has she seen? These are the questions everyone is asking as Aubrey prepares to take the stand. And it's not just her. Diddy's former employees, some of whom were close to his personal and professional life, are also lining up to testify. Each witness adds another thread to this unraveling story, one that's becoming harder to ignore the significance of. Multiple witnesses can't be overstated. Dawn Richards' testimony already sent shockwaves through the courtroom, giving a harrowing glimpse of Cassie's alleged abuse. Her words forced the jury to reconsider Diddy's carefully constructed public image. Now, with Aubrey expected to speak, the patterns of control and toxicity that are being alleged might become even more detailed. She brings a unique perspective, having first-hand experience working with Diddy during Danny Kane's peak, and likely seeing what went on behind the scenes. That's what this trial is building toward. Not isolated incidents, but a potential pattern of behavior. Aubrey's testimony feels especially crucial because of her history of being outspoken about the challenges of working under Diddy over the years. She's been vocal in interviews about his tough management style and high-pressure environment. While she hasn't directly accused him of abuse in the past, her willingness to speak out makes her testimony something to watch closely. If she corroborates any of the claims made by Cassie and Don, it could paint a compelling picture of consistent behavior that spans years. This is exactly what legal experts say makes multiple testimonies so powerful. They create a chain of stories that are harder to dismiss or discredit. Dawn's testimony, for example, detailed instances where she saw Cassie allegedly subjected to Diddy's outbursts and manipulation. She described moments that left Cassie visibly shaken, and she emphasized how the pressure and control seemed ever present in their relationship. Those details alone made an enormous impact. Now, with someone like Aubrey following that up, the jury will begin to see these accounts not as isolated events, but as pieces of a larger pattern. And once a pattern is established, it becomes almost impossible to argue that these situations were isolated accidents or misunderstandings. What makes this even more striking is the inclusion of former employees. These aren't just people who were in Diddy's circle, they were working for him, handling his day-to-day business. Their testimonies could potentially fill in some of the blanks, giving more context to the private moments that have already been described. In the trial, did they witness the alleged abusive behavior firsthand? Or were they indirectly involved by being instructed to cover things up? The weight of their words will depend on what specifics they're able to provide, but their presence alone raises questions of what they know and why they're choosing to speak out now. The impact of having so many witnesses lined up can't be ignored. Legal experts say that as more people step forward, the case against a defendant becomes more credible. Consistent narratives between different people strengthen the accusations, especially when witnesses come from different perspectives. Some personal, like Cassie and Aubrey, and some as professionals, like the former employees. It forces the defense to work harder to cast doubt on each individual account, a strategy that becomes less effective the more people there are to contradict it. So, what might Aubrey reveal? That is the looming question. Will her testimony be the next bombshell moment? In a trial already full of them, some speculate she may bring up professional dynamics that mirror the personal control alleged by Cassie, suggesting that Diddy's behavior wasn't bound to private relationships but extended into his professional dealings. If true, this could further solidify the picture being painted. Observers noted that while Diddy often whispered to his defense attorneys during these moments, his demeanor changed entirely when explicit texts and audio clips were presented. His calm exterior would briefly falter, his eyes narrowing, his posture stiffening. The evidence seemed to carry weight in the room, not just for the jury, but for him as well. The jury's own reactions to the evidence notably raised eyebrows during the playback of the explosive audio recording, shifted the dynamic in the courtroom entirely. This was no longer about public perception. This was about real people weighing the gravity of Cassie's allegations against Diddy. Historically, celebrities in high-profile cases often rely on a controlled image to influence the court of public opinion, but for Diddy, that control seemed to slip. High-pressure moments like these can leave even the most well-trained public figures exposed, and this trial is no exception. What truly left the courtroom on edge, though, was when Diddy's emotions visibly boiled over after Don Richards delivered some of the most damning testimony thus far. According to those in the room, his face darkened, his body language grew defensive, and he leaned aggressively toward his team, whispering furiously for someone who built a career projecting power and authority. This loss of control served as a stark contrast to the image he's long cultivated. It was a moment insiders say that captured the jury's attention in ways even the evidence itself couldn't. But this is bigger than what happens inside the courtroom. The fallout from this trial has begun to seep into the public's perception of Diddy's legacy. For years, he has been a titan of the music industry, a self-made mogul who built an empire on charisma and a larger-than-life life presence. Now those same traits seem to work against him. Each time his composure cracks, be it through visible frustration, whispered exchanges with his lawyers, or even the apparent discomfort in his expression, the jury isn't just witnessing a powerful man on trial, they're watching something unravel. And when jurors sense vulnerability, it can often widen the space for doubt, which works against someone as calculated as Diddy. What makes this trial even harder to predict is the weight of what's still to come, with more witnesses expected to testify, including RTHS. Including Rio Day and former employees. The pressure on Diddy is poised to intensify. How much more evidence will stack up? How many more first-hand accounts will corroborate what Cassie and Don have already revealed? Diddy's reaction so far has shown that even he knows the stakes are high, not just for his legal fate, but for his entire career and legacy. The next weeks will likely see the courtroom grow even more emotionally charged for Diddy. The real question is whether he can maintain his composure as more damaging moments surface. Will his reactions continue to chip away at his carefully built public image, or will he find a way to regain control when it matters most? With more bombshell revelations expected, this trial is far from over, and we're left wondering what happens next. The Diddy trial is more than just a celebrity scandal. It's a wake-up call about the realities of abuse in powerful relationships. Testimonies like Don Richards have pulled back the curtain on the alleged emotional and psychological manipulation that often hides in plain sight. Cassie's struggles, even under cross-examination, highlight the incredible resilience it takes for victims to speak out despite intense scrutiny. This case shows how power and control operate behind closed doors. Stay informed, support victims, and don't let stories like this disappear. The next chapter of 10. This trial might change everything we think we know. Stay tuned.